now tuned in to the Cold Hard Truth, Cayman's #1 hard-hitting live podcast show, where we feature some straightforward conversations on political, social, and celebrity news and all things happening in the Cayman Islands and around the world. This show was created to give the people a voice and a means of being involved and informed without any filters. Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. We bring you the tea, piping hot, so grab your favorite beverage and join the conversation via WhatsApp at 324-1612. Email tips at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Now, here's your host, Sandy Hill, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cayman Islands.
Okay, good morning, folks. Happy Friday. It's hard to believe that it is Friday already, but it is December the 11th. Thank you guys so much. There we go, for tuning in. Big shout out to MF, who is tuned in early this morning. MF says, honey bunny, good morning. How you doing? Good morning to Lynette. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm trying to find my phone, actually. Give me one quick second here. There it is. I knew I left it here charging somewhere. Lynette, good morning to you, my friend. How are you? I hope that you are well. Crystal is already logged in and joining us. And Elizabeth, buenos dias, Elizabeth. Dawn is here for it. Thank you so much, Dawn. And we have Siobhan, Tamara, Miss Beulah, Jaren, Olivia. Whoa, you guys are here for it this morning. So let's get started. First of all, yesterday was a really busy news day. Now we do have guests, by the way, that are joining us. So as soon as they come on, we're going to switch gears a little bit. But in the interim, let's go ahead and discuss a lot of what transpired yesterday. So good morning to Morna. last night here on CMR, we had several, live podcasts that you guys got to see. Sometimes we pre-record what you see as live, just FYI, for more technical reasons than anything else. And I'm really sad that the audio on the one with the lady in her home was unfortunately not as crystal clear as I would have liked for it to have been towards the end. I think the mic just like cut out. I'm not really sure 100% what happened there. We're constantly having to play with mics, and sometimes depending on how you're recording it, you can't actually monitor the audio. I'm looking at the video and you kind of are taking a little bit of a risk and hoping that the audio is also working. But the audio towards the end wasn't the best. But if you missed it, I think a lot of you were tuned in. I think over 200 of you at one point were definitely tuned in to that. So please go and check it out. Listen, the short of it is this woman lives in a national housing home, and she has been given a final eviction notice for December the 31st. And they have said, listen, over the years, she's not been the best at paying. And she admitted herself that they have served her multiple eviction notices over the years, which she has ignored pretty much, and ignored to her own detriment, because now they're like, okay, this is it, we're done. There's so much that I could say about this situation. She admitted that, yes, she has made mistakes. And in her final analysis of the situation, she basically said, listen, she would, if she had any words of advice for other people, she would tell them, don't do what she did, like pay your mortgage. I know when you grow up in a situation where you're growing up poor, a lot of times, you have to try to prioritize what you pay. Let's be honest, most of us who don't even consider ourselves poor still have to kind of juggle bills a little bit. Like one month, you might say, okay, this is my budget and this is what I'm able to do. Another month, you may catch up on a bill that you skipped the previous month. Listen, I have always told people, every single one of us just about are this close away from bankruptcy. Good morning, Yasmin. And so when we interview people like Miss Angela, we don't interview her with a view to looking down on her. We interview with a view to trying to help if there is available help out there, uplifting people who are downtrodden, giving them a real reality check, which I think is also important, and also allowing other people to see that when you make certain mistakes in life, there are consequences. There are always consequences to the decisions that you make and to the things that you do. Folks, that is life. So good morning to Cindy Lee and good morning to Miss Mitzi for tuning in. So her consequences will be dire. And I mean, you can understand, listen, there's no bank in the world that is going to allow you to sit in their property and essentially have 5 years worth of non-payments and that bank not take action against you and repossess that home. And in fact, 5 years of non-payments is a long time. So we could very well argue that the National Housing Trust has been more than accommodating with her. And, now it was just a matter of, okay, enough is enough. It's a sad, sad situation without a doubt. Now, Alric has stepped in and he has attempted to assist this lady as much as he thought he possibly could. He did get ARC Caymanian, which is the Random Acts of Kindness, to step forward, and they were willing to pay for 3 months of her mortgage payments until hoping that would buy her a little bit of time. But unfortunately, the National Housing Trust has said no. Unfortunately, that's not going to buy you any time because the time that you have had, it's literally up. And hey, I understand their position. I'm not here to lambast the National Housing Trust. I am not here to say that they are horrible people. They are a government operated board. And let me be very, very honest with you. The CIDB, the National Housing Trust, these organizations are put in place, the government run organizations. And I feel like a lot of times people abuse and abuse them because they are government run operations. And they think, oh, well, if I go to CNB or Scotiabank, when they tell you to get out, you got to go, and they're going to issue proceedings to evict you from the property. Although I've seen many times when the banks have done that and people still don't leave. And they literally have to go through the process of getting a forceful eviction, which is really, really sad, right? But at the end of the day, you enter into an agreement with people. You agree that you're going to pay a certain amount of money, whether it's for a car loan, a house loan, whatever. And yes, things in life do happen. One of the biggest things that you need to ensure that you do is to communicate with your banks. A lot of times banks and financial institutions are willing to work with you up to a point. But there comes a point in time, to be quite honest, when they recognize that either you just don't have the money for whatever reason, whether it's because you're prioritizing other bills. In this lady's case, she has said that she had other things to do. So she had, an elderly mom. She's got children in the house. She needs to pay CUC and all these other things. And she's not making the best salary in the world either. It's not like she's taking home $4,000 a month and then squandering it and still not paying her $800 mortgage. Having said that, when you enter into an agreement, your mortgage is $800, you have to understand that you need to pay that, just like you got to pay CUC, or CUC is going to shut you off. It's a little bit more challenging for a banking institution to obviously evict people. And I think that's why a lot of people think, oh, I can skip my mortgage. And what I found quite sad, and I, kind of said this to her, is you weren't paying anything on the mortgage. So even if you had, just as a good faith move, pay $100, $200, anything. But the bank did lay out that the last payment was made in August of 2018 for $4,800 because she was in arrears at that time and she was trying to catch up. So the bank has just had enough. Like, you've not been showing them that you're willing to pay any of that money. She does have two adult children in the home, sons. They're adults now. I think when she first got the home, they may not have been adults, but and again, they're finding challenges, finding employment and contributing to the household, but they still have to eat. They're still there. They're still using electricity. Crystal mentions that financial literacy is vital. I think for a lot of us, it is. Most people in this country are not very financially literate. So in other words, we don't know anything about budgeting. We don't understand anything about how to sit down and work out. This is how much money I make. These are my bills. This is what I can take on or not take on. And being realistic about how to make all of that stuff work. And it only takes one illness to put you back on your mortgage, to make you practically homeless. And that's why it's important to make sure that you have certain contingencies and certain things in place as much as possible. But it really is difficult to see someone who has missed the equivalent of 5 years worth of payments. Although it's only $50,000 is still $50,000. And listen to me, I have seen individuals borrow money from the government bank, all $1 million. And that particular case, I'm going to go back and dig that one up because it is a bit of an older situation. I am very, very curious as to whether or not it has ever been paid off or settled or whatever. But this person went to CIDB, borrowed almost $1 million, and they had never paid it back. And this is a person driving around in fancy cars, living a bigger than whatever lifestyle. Oh, I've got a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, whatever these highfalutin cars are. And yet they have borrowed like $1 million using family property to secure that from a government institution. And same thing, went like 5 years and never made a single payment on it. I don't get it. And I can't condone that. And in some instances, that is far worse than what is happening with Miss Angeline, because this person is living this highfalutin lifestyle. Miss Angeline says, she lives a very simple lifestyle. She's not going out there, bawling, as you would say. But I can't support either situation, because when someone like me has a small business and I might want to go to CIDB and borrow a loan, now they've had all these other people who have defaulted on government loans, who have not been good paymasters. And then they're going to say, guess what? No money available. We've got all of this outstanding debt out there, so we can't afford to loan people. And that's one of the reasons why they put everybody through the ringer. And sometimes we sit back and we criticize these institutions for, what they do. And it really is because there is so much bad debt out there. And as a society, we live hand to mouth. We really do live paycheck to paycheck, if you know what I mean. So it is a sad situation. Obviously, the timing is horrible. Is there any good time to evict someone from their home? Clearly not. But at the same time, December the 31st seems a little bit harsh. And I do have to wonder if they were not thinking about, the board was not thinking about the implications of doing it this time of year. They're probably just thinking maybe their fiscal year starts in January and they need to work on getting this cleared off their books or whatever. I don't know what the logic is for why they chose the end of December to implement this. But, our heart goes out to Miss Angela, I think is her proper name. And we do wish that there's something that we could do. She did say, listen, her Christmas wish would be if someone could pay that off for her. And that would be fantastic, folks. But unfortunately in life, that's normally not how it works. That would be amazing. And the other concern that I have is sometimes when people keep rescuing us, and this is why you have to be careful. And I sit in court every single day. And I see this principle being exercised in court, if you will, right? So the judge thinks, right, I put you in drug court. I've given you the benefit of domestic violence counseling, which you need. You need to see a drug counselor. You need to do all of those things. But at some point, when you keep showing up before that judge all the time, every couple months for theft, drug offenses, DUIs, whatever, the judge is going to have to put their foot down and say, listen, enough is enough. I cannot continue to just give you a pass in life because, like I said, there are consequences for your actions and you have to be held accountable. And sometimes we need tough love to be able to say, yeah, I need to shape up. I need to do better. And it's through those experiences that you really learn to do better. You don't really learn a whole lot when people keep bailing you out. People keep running to your rescue and people bail you out. You're like, oh, okay, that was easy. Let me try it again. And it's one of the reasons why you guys will know that I have a lot of young mothers who come to me asking for money to help with situations, rent, kids, whatever. And when they have children, our heart always goes out to them because we're thinking, ultimately, it's the children that will suffer, right? And nobody wants that for sure. But I think that they're also, and I keep saying this as of late when they come, is I say, listen to me. I've helped you before, and you're back here again. What I'm telling you is, even the community at large is under pressure. Everyone is under pressure. And the community at large is less likely to continue to help the same people over and over again, because their question is, why is this woman in this predicament again? Maybe a couple of years ago, she came with 2 children. Now she's got 4. Why do you have 4 children? So people are going to ask you really tough questions. And you have listen, this show is called The Cold Hard Truth. Unlike most politicians, because a lot of politicians are not going to tell you, woman, stop having children. I'm going to tell you that, okay? Because this is a stark reality that you're dealing with. You're uneducated. You can only get a minimum wage job at best. $6 an hour ain't paying no bills. You might get CUC paid depending on how much you're using it. You can't get health insurance. You can't, do anything for your kids. You can't pay a mortgage. I mean, it is just too much pressure on families in that lower income bracket. I appreciate that for a number of different reasons. There's a holistic approach that we have to use, Crystal and others, to address this, including financial literacy, courses, but there's so much more, right? Somebody needs to have a real conversation with these young girls from when they're in middle school. I'm not telling you not to have sex. That's not realistic. And I know you guys are going to be out there humping at everything. But a couple of things you need to do. Number one, protect yourself, because there are real STDs out there that you need to be concerned about. And number two, part of your protection plan should be not having a baby for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that jumps on you. It's not necessary. You can have that person jump on you all you want, but there's no need for you to get pregnant. In this day and age, there are tremendous measures in place that will ensure 99.9999999% accurate that you do not get pregnant. And so, this constant, oh, I'm having another baby, I'm like, why? Because now that child gets added to a family of 3, 4, 5 kids. All of them are going to have a lower quality of life and less opportunities, simply because you as a parent don't understand the concept of birth control and, doing what you got to do. And like I said, it's one of those situations where people don't like you to speak on it. They feel like, oh, you're judging them, or you're trying to be better than them. Listen, I am in no position to judge anyone. I come from the same cloth that a lot of these young girls come from, the same environment, the same poverty, and the whole 9 yards. The only difference with me is I was able to go overseas, live with my aunt, and get a glimmer of hope from seeing a different lifestyle. Get a glimmer of hope from saying, wow, with the right things in place, with an education, not burdening myself with all these children, I might have an opportunity in life to kind of pull myself up out of this cycle of poverty. And there are markers that prove that if you do certain things in life, your chances of being able to do that are increased significantly. These are the conversations that your MLAs need to be having with you. But unfortunately, most of them are afraid to tell you the cold hard truth, because you may not vote for them. One of the things that Angeline said that I thought was interesting is, she'd had a discussion with someone at the National Housing Trust, and they were not all of that. They were not nice, is what she said about it. And I get that some people don't know how to give you the cold hard truth in a nice way. And maybe they just think there isn't a nice way to tell you the cold hard truth about your finances, about how you're handling your business. I don't really know. But what I do know is that there is a stark reality that we are all dealing with. So I'm going to leave that there. Lynette says, I agree with you 100%. It's all about choices. Everyone has problems at the end of the day. Marshall, thank you so much for tuning in. And the sad thing, Lynette, about problems is they only compound themselves. They never resolve themselves. And that's why we need to give people the tools to try to help themselves as well. Tools have to be available. So Crystal says that she understands the bank's perspective, and it's an unfortunate situation. CIDB is the Cayman Islands Development Bank. They are a government-owned financial institution that loans money to everybody from, I think they still do student loans. They do small business loans and other such services. So according to their website, I think they've had a slight name change, but it says small business loans in Grand Cayman, CIDB. That's on their website title. But I believe that they do give loans for like people who want educational loans and other things as well. So you can check them out. But yeah, it's a government-owned bank. I have some real concerns about them, and one day I'm going to talk about them in more detail. You send them an email with immediate questions, they don't even bother to respond. So it says on their website that they do business loans, mortgages, student loans, and various consumer loans. But they are government-owned. And at the end of the day, a government-owned bank, I feel like people just feel like they can do whatever because, oh, it's a government-owned bank and they don't have to worry about it. Not really. You got to pay your bills just like any other bank. And in fact, government is then laden with the burden of all of this bad debt, which if you don't think that that impacts all of us and the high quality of living that we all have to endure, think again. There's a trickle-down impact. And in a country this small, it doesn't take much for the pendulum to be impacted by one little ripple, one little movement. So Crystal, good morning. Crystal says, this is why I'm continuing to work hard and further my education. If I can't get a job here, fine, I will move overseas. And unfortunately, that is one of the unfortunate things about, life in Cayman. There are times when you do have to go overseas to make things work. And it just is what it is. Unfortunate? Absolutely. Reality? Absolutely. Jeremy says, trying to keep a man. I don't know how anybody in this day and age can actually believe that having a child for a man is a way to keep him. Look around, folks. Reality. None of these jokers that are getting these girls pregnant are impacted by the fact that you are pregnant by them or you're having a child with them. You're just one of 10 or how many there are. And they don't care. And they have no jobs and no prospects of helping you to support your child. So unfortunately, the possibilities of them being able to assist you financially are slim to none. Again, stark reality. And then you're going to be wasting your time in and out of court to be trying to track down some joker to come in and pay you money, and it just ain't happening because either he doesn't have a job, or when he does have a job, he's got 4 or 5 other children that each one of them has to get $200 out of his paycheck, and your kid, number 5, is at the bottom of the totem pole. Crystal says you need to be making at least $110,000 in Cayman to live comfortably. I wouldn't doubt that. Renita says it may not be a popular thought, but the choice of abortion should be available, especially with this bullshit $6 an hour minimum wage that government has slapped Caymanians in their faces with. Renita, I am very much pro-choice. And I know a lot of people in this community are not going to like you said, that concept. It's not a popular thought. But I not only am I pro-choice after something has happened, I am pro-choice beforehand. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There are numerous, options available to women in this community that, unfortunately, people try to dissuade you from. And when I say people, I mean the medical professionals that are dealing with a lot of these young girls. So I know for a fact that there have been people who have gone to the doctor after child number 2 or 3 and said, I want to get my tubes tied. And the physicians have said to them, no, you're too young. You're too this. We need your father's permission. We need your boyfriend or husband's permission. And I'm like, what? You need a spouse's permission to tell me what to do with my body and the decisions that I can make? You have got to be crazy. And I have fought to have the HSA, because apparently that isn't their policy, but that's what the physicians are doing. I have fought to have them really send the message quite clearly that you cannot tell a patient that they are not eligible for a tubal ligation, or they're not eligible for other long-term birth control options just because you, again, grew up in a Caribbean environment where you think that, having a million children is what we all are supposed to do. And we'll all figure it out later on. And the most hurtful part of the whole situation, folks, is those same people who were telling you, oh, no, you can't get a tubal ligation done, you can't get your tubes tied, are the same physicians when you're out there begging on the streets trying to get a job, they can't help you. They ain't gonna help you. They're living their good lifestyle. Notice what they do. They might have 1 child or 2 children, and they're making top dollar. And they're not lading themselves down with these sorts of options. And guess what? They are taking advantage of them. Why are women getting tubes tied? Why are men not getting tied off? There's just so many cultural questions that I have about this. So I agree with you in terms of, Renita, giving women choices beforehand, because as Karen just said, prevention is way better than cure. And if it also means giving a woman the choice, I personally don't believe that, I would ever be in a position where I would want to abort a child. However, I think the option should be there for people to decide. That is on them. Of course, will we ever get there? Probably not, because we live in such an incredibly ignorant community. But please remember, we're trying to address fighting in schools, and the solution from our ministerial perspective for those types of things is let us pray about it. So we're not ready for the cold hard truth in this country on so many levels. We're just not about having those types of conversations. Crystal says, that's sad. Why can't these women just close their legs? Crystal, because it's not realistic. How many women you know out there, women and men, that are closing their legs and not having a good time with sex? That's why I don't have that conversation with young people, right? It would be great. And the churches are banging that into their heads, and it doesn't work. Keeping your legs closed doesn't work because it doesn't take very much for you to unravel them, apparently. Most people do not have that level of self-control. And I'm a realist, and I get it. I wasn't like one, out there at 16, 17, or 18 having sex. I grew up in a very strict environment. So I was like, ooh, I'm not going to be touching that anytime soon. But even once you start as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, everybody knows how it is. Sex feels great. You enjoy it. You like it. So I'm not here to be Mother Theresa and tell you, don't have sexual relations. Listen, knock yourself out. Have as much sex as you want. But you need to be smart about it. So you need to be protecting yourself, and you need to be making, better decisions in terms of how to do that. Protection from STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, as well as pregnancy, because unfortunately, the woman is the one who always gets laden down with carrying the child. It's not the man normally. He's like, oh, gotta go. And he's out the door. Cassie, good morning. Cassie found that funny. But listen, I'm just being honest. You know what I'm saying? There's a level of honesty that just isn't happening in this community and in this country. So Carol says, yes, this is so wrong. It has nothing to do with any man. What a woman does to her body, this happens the world over, not just here. Well, I was so surprised when young girls were telling me that this is what they were being told here, because we're supposed to be a first world country, but a lot of our thinking is very much third world. And so one of the things I did was I reached out to the HSA and I said, I'm just curious, what is your policy in regards to this? And as it turns out, that may have been the policy at some time, but that isn't the current policy. And people are still being told that. And I said, listen, I'm going to start naming physicians and giving names of who is actually telling these young girls this, because they give me a lot of detail and I have no reason not to believe them. And this isn't right that any physician should be telling you, oh, you're still so young. You're only 25. Well, hello. If I'm 25 and I have 2 and 3 children, I think I'm good. Okay. Age doesn't have anything to do with it. If I'm 25, but I have enough children, I don't need to be waiting till I'm 40 to go, oh yeah, maybe I'll tie off my tubes at 40 and have another 8 children in the bag. So it's like the physicians themselves, I'm thinking, how smart are they? Because what they're saying doesn't even make any sense. So Marshall says, if a young girl see that after baby, 2 things ain't working in terms of relationship or getting a job, then they shouldn't be going for baby number 3 and 4. Well, you know what? Even baby number 1 and 2 has an impact on your ability to get a job. Because listen, a lot of employers will look at you and go, oh Lord, she's only 20, 21, 22, and she's already got a couple kids. They see the writing on the wall. Babies get sick sometimes. They can't go to school. There's so many like little things that come up, and a lot of employers see you as undesirable as a result of that. So our guest is going to be joining us here shortly, and I do want to switch gears just a little bit. Karen says, at the end of the day, it's not fair to the children. Some children live in a relatively decent environment and get to travel and enjoy different aspects of life. Then you have the ones that can't have those experiences because they live in a single parent household with 5 or 6 other children, and some don't even have a passport. Sad, sad. And it's true. You should be trying to give your children as many opportunities as possible. And unfortunately, the more children you have, the less money there is to create those opportunities for your children to have, or your child to have a well-balanced life. And I think being able to travel, being able to occasionally go out to dinner at a decent restaurant, those are all things that children should be able to avail themselves of and experience every once in a while. So Toshi says, I have one child, and they told me in Jamaica that they can't tie me off until I have up to 5 children, and they still can't tell me off until my partner signs up some form, and it had to be signed and sealed by JP2. This is what I'm talking about, Toshi. Explain to me how that's even in terms of your human rights, your personal rights. How does that make any sense? And I hate to say it, but a vast majority of the physicians that we do have hired at the HSA come from countries like Jamaica, where maybe that was the norm, telling people that kind of foolishness. I don't know if the Jamaican government supports that or not, or if that's an official policy, but to me, that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. So you need to wait until you have 5 children and then turn around and get your husband's permission signed and sealed in front of a JP. Wow. I mean, stupidity is rampant in this country. Like, seriously, that to me, that just doesn't make any sense. Absolutely stupid. But, these are the conversations. When was the last time you heard an MLA talking about birth control in this country, or family planning, parental training, anything that impacts us on a social level? They do not have these discussions with the people when that's exactly what they need to be doing. The people need true leadership, and true leadership is not always about finance and law. Those things are great. I have a law degree. I hate finance, but I have a law degree, and I understand the implications of the legal system in every single aspect of our lives. However, one of the reasons why we think, having women in particular in the Legislative Assembly is that they get all of these things. They get it. They're a woman. They understand family planning. They understand, having to juggle working full time, having kids, sometimes having a husband that's supportive, sometimes not having a partner that is supportive. And so they should be pushing for legislative changes. They should be pushing for social changes, educational changes that benefit all of us. And it just doesn't happen. Crystal says, I believe your point on the lack of self-control. Sex is not the problem, but when you're becoming an addict or getting pregnant with lack of income, then we have a problem. Having a child is a huge responsibility. Ding, ding, ding. It definitely is. Atlas reminds us that in China, you can't have more than one. The interesting thing about China, though, is they've created other issues because of their one-child policy, including people, if they have one child and one child is a girl, they end up killing the child because it is more valuable in that community to have a male child. And now they have an issue where they have too many men and not enough women to go around. So I'm not saying let's go that crazy and have a one-child policy, but I'm saying we just need to have things in place where people think a little bit more about these aspects of their lives. Okay, the other thing I wanted to discuss last night, so there was a number of stories, folks, that were very, very interesting. One of them was the deputy governor spoke in the Legislative Assembly yesterday, and he talked about the fact that the DPP's office will be appealing the ruling of Magistrate Angeline Hernandez. She was the magistrate who gave these 2 quarantine breachers, community service. And so the DPP is going to appeal that. Good for the DPP. I'm not sure how much good an appeal will actually do, however, because the way that I'm reading the legislation, and again, I have a law degree, but I'm certainly no lawyer. We're going to have a lawyer here in a second. But how I read the legislation, if it says up to $10,000, that gives the judge full discretionary powers to do whatever they want. And so to me, this is a legislative issue. This is an issue where the legislators screwed up and they didn't quite get the wording correctly, and they should have known better. So for an appeals court to now overturn that, I'm not so sure if that's going to happen or not. Let me just put it that way. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah. Okay. So there was also word of an inoculation or vaccine program that is being rolled out. So the premier spoke about that. We don't have time this morning, unfortunately, to get into that because we will have a guest who's going to be joining us here shortly. So we want to respect the time with the guests. What I would say about this, folks, is on Monday, do tune in because we'll have an opportunity to go through some of the details of what is being proposed with the vaccine and maybe look at some questions that you guys have as well. Last night, I also live streamed, as many of you are aware, some of the video footage of my poor Coco's attack. Now, I want to explain this because, first of all, I did not watch it because I lived it. So I don't have to rewatch it. But I do want to explain the motivation behind doing what I did. It was one of the most difficult things in my life that I've ever had to endure. I'll be very, very honest with you. And when it happened, it was so surreal and unbelievable. And at the same time, afterwards, as I'm reflecting on it, I'm having to put a police report together, it occurs to me that sometimes words cannot really do justice to explaining how something played out and how something transpired. It is hard for me to explain to you in the moment what that felt like, how helpless I felt, how to this day and probably forever, I will always blame myself for, just even deciding to walk outside at that moment. And you recognize that in life, there are things that you have no control over. And no matter what I would have done, it probably would not have helped much. I did my best to save her. It happened so quickly. That's the other thing that is like really shocking. In just a matter of minutes, you saw how this dog stole every bit of energy out of my poor dog. You heard her cries. And I also thought that it was really, really important for you guys to see this because it's the cold, hard truth. It's a reality. And seeing it in video with audio and hearing her cries and hearing it, a lot of you said to me that you were not able to watch the whole thing, that you were so, impacted by it. So when you hear me start to push for legislative changes in this country, as it relates to the animal control law, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. So a lot of you knew that Coco had died, that she'd been attacked, and you'd reached out. But until some of you saw it last night, you didn't fully get it, if that makes any sense. If you've never seen a dog be attacked or a person be attacked or somebody lose their life in such a violent way, seeing it changes everything. And I had so many more people reach out to me last night saying, I was walking in my neighborhood and I was attacked personally by a pit bull. Or the same thing keeps happening to my dog. My dog has now been attacked 3 times in our neighborhood and the police aren't doing anything. DOA says that they're helpless. All of these stories continue to emerge after you guys saw precisely what happened last night. And a lot of you are saying to me, on this fight, we support you 100%. Let us know if there's anything that we can do. And I certainly appreciate that. Nothing will ever be able to bring her back, unfortunately. And so whatever we do going forward, it really is a matter of trying to help other people, trying to prevent this horrific situation. And it's 10 minutes of horror that I shared with you guys, but it will be a lifelong loss of trying to prevent this from happening to somebody else. And as all of you saw, my daughter was literally right there. Even my husband said that when he came outside, he was trying his best, but there was also the second dog there. So he didn't know if he really went hard, if that second dog would turn on him and attacked him. I mean, there were just so many factors involved. The neighbors eventually came out. One of them came out with a machete. I wish he had come out, seconds before, because I literally would have grabbed that machete and chopped that dog. I was willing to do anything to try to save my Coco. And I tried to do anything to try to save her. And it just wasn't to be. Now, in our review of additional footage, we actually discovered that these dogs were out a lot longer than their owner recognized. And this is a really dangerous situation because, she has said the people working on the fence and they inadvertently left the gate open. Whatever the reason was, these dogs were out. And in fact, we went back and looked at some of our other cameras, and these dogs were in our yard earlier in the evening, marking their territory on our trees, and we didn't know. And we have all sorts of indicators, like the ring security light will ding, ding, ding. But sometimes you hear that so often, like you don't go, okay, what is it right this second? And ironically enough, my husband said to me, Coco was at the door. So she must have sensed them before we even went outside. She was at the door sniffing and barking, and we had company over, and basically, like you do with a lot of dogs, you tell them, oh, stop making noise, sort of thing. So he's like, Coco, stop it. But she knew that they were out there, and God knows, I think to myself, I wish I knew that they were out there, because I would not have ventured outside, because, I just wouldn't have done it. And so it was a very, very difficult video, I know, for you guys to watch. Thank you, Robin. Like I said, I've not been able to bring myself to watch it. I felt physically sick as this was happening. And after they took her to the doctor, like I couldn't even, it's hard to explain, but I felt like I wanted to throw up. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Like I literally just had to come inside and lie down. And at the same time, as a parent, I'm having to be very conscious of my reaction and the things that I'm doing and how that is going to impact my daughter's reaction to the whole situation. Because although she saw part of the fight, she doesn't understand the significance of really what was going on in that moment. She was just like, oh, those bad dogs hurt Coco, and the police should take them away. And so I had to, just try to be as calm as I could just for her. But as you could see, when I was outside, I was not calm. I was just losing it completely. And, it's just a sad and horrific situation that I would never want anyone to endure. So that video is up, and I apologize for having to share such a horrific video with you guys. But like I said, as I thought about it, it occurred to me that there's no way to really explain this to you guys. Words just don't do the situation justice. But when you hear my little Coco and her little voice, like literally, you could feel the life like slipping away. And then you see there was so much stuff that you couldn't see in that video. When you see a dog running off with your dog in its mouth, like your dog is a rag doll. And I was just like, literally in that moment, I don't even know if the camera picked up on this, if you guys heard this last night, but I was like, get my effing dog back right now, because I don't want this dog to take Coco back into its yard and just rip her apart like how they do chickens or whatever, because that's what a dog will do. And I said, no, I cannot allow her to go like this. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be one thing if he's already choked her to death. He mangled her neck and all that stuff. But then to take her into your yard and finish her off, I just said, no, somebody go get my dog. But, it was dark. It was the neighbor's yard because he went back into his own territory at that particular point. And so nobody could even see. It ended up being the owner of the dog, my neighbor, who went back and retrieved Coco's body. And, my husband didn't want me to see what she looked like afterwards. He's like, I don't want you to have these memories of her, because, when they finally assessed the damage and they shaved her down, it was so incredibly horrific. And even Dr. Brenda said, it's probably best that you didn't see that. Like, just try to remember her for being the beautiful dog that she was. And, her injuries were really, really significant. And in retrospect, I think everyone is surprised that she even survived the attack on Monday night into basically Tuesday night when she passed away. And, Dr. Brenda says that's just a testament to how physically, even for a 10-year-old dog, the physical condition that she was in. She was a well taken care of dog, and she was able to survive it, for a little bit. But really, unfortunately not for long. So, we all have losses in life. We all have to endure these things. It's unfortunate that it is part of life, but for me, her loss cannot be in vain. That's the biggest message here. I can't allow this to happen to anybody else. I refuse to sit back and allow dangerous dogs to be in our community, and the police claim that they're helpless. They don't know the animal law. DOA is saying, okay, even the powers that they have, they're not really executing properly. Like, some change has got to come out of this. So into the new year, I'm going to make it through Christmas. Into the new year, I'm going to meet with the commissioner of police. I'm going to meet with DOA. I'm going to meet with other people because we need some change in this country, folks. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Toshi. I appreciate that it was very, very difficult for people to watch. And if you love animals, even if you don't love animals, seeing something like that is just a real eye opener. So thank you so much, Yasmin. And Neelas, thank you. I really appreciate it. Good morning, Anne-Marie. Thank you again, Robin. And you just have to try to keep the memories alive, but at the same time, like I said, change is important. So speaking of change, we've got Samuel Jackson, who's going to be joining us. A lot of you know him as Sammy Jackson. He is an attorney at law. Good morning to you, Mr. Sammy.
Good morning, Sandra. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So Sammy's an attorney. Funny enough, I've always heard his name in the legal fraternity, and he's well known, but I've actually never seen him. I've probably seen him in person, just not realize it. So now I get to actually put a face with it. Sammy, how long have you been practicing law? I think it's been a minute.
Nearly 27 years now.
Wow. So there you go, folks. He's not new to the circus at all. But we are here this morning. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're here this morning to talk to Sammy about the legal services bill, which we have discussed this topic before in this show. And I have a number of months ago talked about how the legal fraternity is under attack in this country. And there's so much, Sammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's so much that happens in pockets of our society, whether it's the accounting firm, the legal fraternity, that the average person just has no clue about. They think, oh, lawyers are good. They're making tons of money. We see them driving fancy cars and living in nice homes. They have a good life. And in fact, as it turns out, lawyers might be higher up on the food chain than some of us, but they are fighting for their rights. They're fighting for their livelihoods, just like the $6 an hour man who's working at the gas station. Sammy, is that a fair assessment of life as a lawyer?
It is, but I need to point out that it's not the lawyers or the legal profession that's under attack. It's just a small segment of it, really, which is comprised of the small Caymanian law practices, a lot of whom have come to be because they were pushed out of law firms or had to leave law firms in Georgetown, the so-called, I call them magic circle or cartel firms. And it's sad to see what's going on right now with this bill, because despite the fact that we've had many opportunities to get it right, once again, we're confronted with a rushed bill, which is sadly lacking in terms of the fundamental provisions that need to be in there to protect not just lawyers in the profession, not just Caymanian lawyers in the profession, but the Cayman Islands as a whole. In my humble opinion, this legislation has a number of flaws. It is, first of all, I'd like to say I'm encouraged that it's being brought. I wish we had a little more time to consider it. I wish we had a little more background information as to what the government's considered position was on not adopting the numerous fundamental provisions that have been proposed time and again, not just by Caymanian attorneys, but by members of the opposition, both past and present. And these things are so obviously fundamental to protecting Caymanian interests and the interests of the Cayman economy, that it boggles me to see that they are still not being addressed.
Mm-hmm.
The principal things that I am concerned about are not just myself, but the organization that I belong to, which is ALPA, which is the Association of Legal Practitioners and Advocates, which is comprised of small Caymanian business owners, legal business owners.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say small, I mean firms of less than 5 lawyers, which firms are owned wholly by Caymanians. And our concerns, which we've expressed in writing, and it's up on our website now. We just recently created a website, finally, and we've said to the government there are a number of fundamental things that have to be addressed. One obvious one is the Caymanian ownership and control of law firms. That doesn't have to happen overnight. No one has ever said that it needs to happen overnight, because when we raised it before many years ago, we raised it again in more recently in 2016, 2017. We were told that we can't expect law firms that are already here who have gotten in their foot in the door kind of thing, that to just chase them off the island. No one has ever advocated that. We all recognize that once you license a business here, they have under the current legislation, which admittedly is woefully inadequate, that they have a legitimate expectancy to continue, or a legitimate expectation to continue to operate as that business. But if the government takes a policy decision, as it should, that it is in the best interest of the country, that to bring these businesses, that is to say legal businesses, in line with all other major businesses in the country, and all even small businesses, that is to say that they have to be Caymanian owned and controlled, except in exceptional circumstances where they're licensed under an LCCL, a local companies control law license, to operate whilst they are foreign owned. And we know that this particular government has been handing out LLCLs like Christmas candy, along with concession packages and that sort of thing. That in and of itself is very troubling. But what worries us is that if we're talking about law firms here, comprised of folks who make a living out of exploiting the loopholes. Let's be honest about that. They find a way to craft and structure contracts and special purpose vehicles and that sort of thing, particularly the big financial industry related firms. They are very creative, they're very competent, they're very knowledgeable, and they will, unless we express in very clear black and white terms in this legislation what is prescribed and what is proscribed, then they're going to find a way to exploit it. I start to wonder when I hear the resistance to what I see as basic requirements, right? Whether that is not intentional. I mean, when you're confronted with certain overt acts and statements made by government officials, both outside and inside the parliament, you can only draw one irresistible inference from that, and that is that somebody is deliberately ignoring the best interests of the Cayman Islands. That blows me away. I mean, we're talking about doing what's best for Cayman. How can someone who has sworn an oath of allegiance to his office after winning an election eschew that, just throw that out the window, just disregard it entirely?
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to discuss with you is I like dealing with empirical data when it's available. And before I get on to the empirical data, I wanted to explain this data is readily available from the internet and from local legislation. And I am sure that the government knew well in advance it was going to bring this legislation.
Of course.
It makes me wonder why it is that the government has never done that economic impact assessment that it needs to do for any new legislation to determine whether its legislative initiative is good for the country or not. That seems pretty obvious and fundamental as well. Why haven't you done that? The data is there, and we can.
Let me just Sammy, can I just pause you for one quick second, right? Because I do think you just made an interesting point about what the legislators are doing and saying, and also what they're not doing and saying. And the point that you make is that lawyers in particular who can find any loophole in anything, I mean, after all, that's what lawyers do, right? If you give them a piece of legislation that is less than airtight in its drafting, you are just opening up Pandora's box for this situation to get far worse than what it is right now. We have at least 3 lawyers currently in the Legislative Assembly, former attorneys. They're obviously MPs now. So we've got the Premier, who was a partner at a law firm. We've got Juliana O'Connor Connolly, who was a lawyer. And we have Tara Rivers. Is there anybody else that I'm missing out? I think it's those 3, right? So I would have thought that having 3 Caymanian attorneys as part of the political fraternity, that they would get a lot of the concerns that Caymanian attorneys are having. What do you think is missing here? What are we missing? Why don't they care? Why don't they get it? Is that because that was 20 something years ago? That was a past life that they no longer recall? Did they not have the same struggles that a lot of Caymanian attorneys had? Are they in the back pockets of these big law firms now? What is going on here?
Well, it's always hard to ascertain exactly what is going to motivate or is motivating government. But I can tell you for a fact, because I sat on the executive committee of the Council of the Caymanian Bar Association, which was sadly disbanded a couple of years ago, when the Premier was the president. And I was proud to serve on that council with him. And I can tell you for a fact that back then, he certainly was sympathetic to this cause. And back then, we were talking about how grossly inadequate the legislation was and how it didn't protect Caymanian interests, and to the point about exploitation. The reason no one has been prosecuted, well, one of the reasons I believe that no one has been prosecuted for holding themselves out as Caymanian lawyers when they don't have a practicing certificate abroad, and those who, and even if they're beyond the jurisdiction, the ones who are here, who are counseling and procuring the commission of that offense, could also be prosecuted. The reason why no one has ever been prosecuted for that is because the fine is $200. That's a couple of minutes work for those folks in those big firms. They make, somewhere around $1,000 out, some of them, and it's just crazy to see that little inadequacy couldn't have been addressed, right? Since 1969, and we keep hearing, we've never been able to amend this legislation. That is not true. The legal practitioners law as it currently stands has been amended a number of times. All it takes is for you to open to look at the front page, and you will see how many amendments were made over time. There were minor ones, but what actually happened is because the governments of the past and this government in a previous form in 2016 brought bills which had too much, were unpalatable because they had too many provisions that we saw was handing over the reins to the law firms. There was great resistance to those provisions, and this very same Premier is the same guy who pulled the plug on that. Then he turned around and blames us for blocking it. We didn't block legislation. We've always been advocating for legislation. I was one of the first people way back when, along with Theresa, Pitcairn, and Sherry Bowden-Cohen, we went and interviewed a lot of people in the profession. We spoke to members of the judiciary. We were told we need an independent regulatory authority. That was one of the first things we were the first group of people I know that were advocating for that. And here we are today, confronted with a bill that has some strange creature in it. So it's now morphed into a council. It was called a board, and then we pointed out, well, what is a board? You mean a board of directors of a statutory authority? Well, where's the authority? Where's the provisions for the authority? Now I hear that they're amending it to call it a council, which is another anachronism, which we should move away from, simply because we now have a public authorities law that took effect in June of 2019 that says that all statutory authorities need to become public authorities. And I believe that is exactly the reason why we don't have a public authority in conformity with that law, is because that would be a truly functioning independent authority. And it wouldn't be able to be subject to manipulation, not legally. And the type of thing that we have seen go on since the advent of this entity that replaced the Bar Association and the Law Society that calls itself SILPA. That's a wonderful story in and of itself. And I thank you for pointing that out on one of your shows in months past. And I can tell you, Sandra, as in depth as that reporting was that you did, which I truly appreciated. That is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
It would take weeks to download the amount of information that you would need to make an fully informed decision about just how corrupt a deal that was. That's what I'm calling it. And I can say that because I have 2 lawsuits pending one against the government and SILPA and CARA, and one against SILPA itself, which is in the form of an appeal, because they were nominated as the supervisory authority of AML. And I don't want to get too far into this, but I want to explain some of the background to show those folks who are not in the know how we got to where we are, and maybe they can draw their own inferences as to why the government is doing what it's doing now. SILPA was empowered by government, even though it's a privately owned, privately formed company formed in the offices of Maples and Calder, and has members from all. The membership of the board is comprised primarily of Caymanian lawyers from the large law firms. We've all heard the stories about how they don't have free reign over their careers. So that begs the question of its objectivity, its independence, etc. But what happened next was even more mind-blowing. They got together one evening on the 29th of May, or that's when they say it happened, and that was 2 days before the advent of the Public Authorities Law, and they invented the strangest of creations, an imaginary board called the Cayman Attorneys Regulation Authority. Now, they could call that an authority, even though it's not licensed by law, but the new thing, they can't call that an authority. Why is that? But that authority, as they call themselves, was comprised of a retired partner of Maples and Calder and some of his friends from the UK and some other members of staff. And they were handed over the reins by SILPA. The AG says it was because they needed a Chinese wall, presumably because that's a tacit actually admission that SILPA has conflicts of interest. And then that entity, as we predicted, we said to the government, this is what is going to happen. They didn't listen, and they didn't do anything despite promises. And that authority, guess what, came after those of us Caymanian lawyers that questioned its legitimacy and hit us all with fines. And we're still fighting that battle, and we're going to win that battle, despite all the motions that the government may bring to try to give them retroactive indemnity. That's not going to work. I'm here to say that. But when you see that level of collusion, so I'm talking about overt acts and statements that from which you can only draw one irresistible inference. Right. When you see that sort of collusion going on for the last 2 years, right? All kinds manner of rubbish being said, published. Like, for example, the classic one is, and I challenge them on this, and they haven't answered it yet, from July. Why is it that SILPA advertises on its website that it's issuing practice and certificates? That's a patent lie. They can't issue practice and certificates. Only the clerk of courts can do that under the current legislation.
Unless SILPA knows something that you don't know in terms of what's coming in the future, which
I think it was either wishful thinking or they got ahead of themselves. They got ahead of the game, and maybe the government didn't follow lockstep with them this time. But when you see that, you start to understand, and I know the AG is saying that this bill is independent, was crafted by his own legislative drafting department, but it is clear to see the fingerprints of SILPA on this. Not SILPA, because I need to explain that as well. A lot of the folks in SILPA are friends of mine. A lot of the members of the board of SILPA, this isn't personal, There's some good, competent lawyers there, people who I respect and love, and I don't want to malign them personally. But as an entity that is controlled by multi-million dollar per year in terms of revenue law firms, you know how that game is played. And the other inference to be drawn from that is these are the folks who are obviously driving this initiative, whether it's directly or indirectly. And I've said a number of times, I know for a fact that the president of SILPA, David Collins, was able to call on a day's notice a meeting with the Premier and the Attorney General and Minister Hugh in the back rooms of the LA, because one of the attendees at our meetings told me so. And I was blown away to know that he had that kind of clout, right? It took us months to get audience and Alpha, that is. And I guess that's because we don't matter. We're just some small local attorneys. We don't deserve that kind of airtime. You know, we're not the movers and shakers. We don't represent this financial services institution that we say is a pillar of the economy, which is true. And on that point, I want to say no one, including myself, from Alba, no one I know that is advocating along the lines of what I'm advocating is interested in doing harm to the financial services industry. In fact, what we are trying to do is protect it and, more importantly, Cayman from itself. Because sometimes people are blinded by greed and short-term gain. And that is what I see here. If you as a government, and the government is complicit in this, at least they are grossly negligent. Because if you don't see the benefit, and you now have the reins of Parliament, you now have the opportunity, Mr. McLaughlin, to do all those things you so strenuously advocated for back when we were in the CBA Council. You can now finally fix this properly, the way I know you know it should be fixed. So I don't want to hear any excuses about these folks are going to pull up sticks and run away, because that ain't happening. And I'll give you numbers, right? I did a little exercise last night with some colleagues of mine. We looked at the work permit fee schedule. And the average work permit fee, as far as we could ascertain from looking at that schedule, taking 7 examples from regular lawyer all the way up to managing partner, is $22,000 per annum, right? This is the crux of the matter. It's about cost. It's about saving costs, and it's about avoiding scrutiny and avoiding regulation. One of the things we are advocating for is that every lawyer overseas, onshore or offshore or wherever they are in the world, if they're going to be a Caymanian lawyer, because they need to be held accountable and because they need to compete as a matter of principle, right? They need to be held to compete through the work permit process with any available Caymanian for those jobs, right? And I know you're going to hear, oh, there's too many of them. You don't need to worry about Caymanians being displaced. We don't have that many Caymanian lawyers. Well, shame on us, because we have a law school, and I don't even want to get into where I think that's going. But the reality of the matter is, when you look at the numbers, and I've heard out of the Premier's mouth that it's 900 odd lawyers now that are called to Cayman Bar on the roll here.
Wow.
We don't know how many are overseas, but if we assume that, and what is being proposed is that we simply give an equal number of lawyers that each firm has, total lawyers, whether they're Caymanian or expatriate in Cayman. We give it we license a similar number, an identical number, it's the 1-to-1 ratio of lawyers to work in those overseas offices without a permit, after they pay a $2,000 or $3,000 extra practice certificate fee. That's peanuts, because when you look at what we forego in terms of permit fees alone, just to put numbers on this, take the 22,000. Let's assume 800 of those 900 attorneys work for the big firms. That's a conservative estimate, but we're working in round numbers. Times 800 by 22,000, the average work permit fee of 22,000, and you come up with $17.6 million per annum in fee revenue that we're foregoing. 17.6 million. Now, if you even round that down to 15 million, imagine what a government could do, not just for the legal profession, but for everybody in this country if it had an extra $15 million income from work permits. for these firms that can well afford them. You think $15 to $17 million collectively spent by the law firms extra per year is going to harm their business? I don't think so. But when you consider that those are just the lawyers, but there's going to be support staff, some of which are going to be expatriate, and a lot of which are going to be Caymanian.
Right.
Those jobs are going to disappear too, because what you're doing is you're actually creating a cost savings exercise for the law firms. You're allowing them to have half of their labor force, their active operative, the main part of their labor force. And when you consider that they're going to need support staff too, literally it's going to be half their labor force placed overseas for far, far cheaper than it would to bring them here.
Right. Wow.
That's insanity.
Yeah.
That's negligence on the part of the government. If they are happy with that, then they are failing miserably in their duty to the people of this country. And failing miserably includes failing to ever for giving up half of the opportunity. I'll put it that way, for Caymanians to get a job in the legal industry. Right? Half of the industry is going to be overseas. There's no doubt about that. You think about it, you can save, several $1 million a year by just moving half your labor force overseas. Why wouldn't they do that? Oh, you'll hear, there's many benefits to being in Cayman. Really? What is it for them? Yeah, it's a good, safe place to live. We all love living here, but it's a high cost of living. So that also impacts, especially when you're bringing in foreign labor, that impacts, your ability to hire. It's much easier to hire folks where they are or send them somewhere else where it's cheaper to live. You can then pay them less because they don't have to pay the high cost of living in Cayman. What does that then interpret into or result in? Those of us who are on the ground in Cayman have to meet the costs, which are going to be enhanced in the legal profession. The cost is of regulating these folks, right? Regulating the industry, first off, is going to become more expensive. Right off the bat, if we do what the FATF and the CFATF expect us to do in terms of AML regulation alone, that is already costing us money. But if we're going to allow these firms to grow their firms overseas, it's going to be particularly expensive to regulate folks here, and it's going to be extremely expensive to regulate folks over there. In fact, it's going to be logistically impossible and legally, in some instances, impossible to actually perform any meaningful regulation with these overseas practitioners. That is a different thing altogether. That's a whole different area, which is very troubling, and in and of itself promotes unfairness. And here's why. As I adverted to earlier, there's a large number of small Caymanian businesses that have been under attack. Some of us have been hit with fines. Some of us have had to file lawsuits. A great expense to us, not just out of our pockets. We're lawyers, we can defend ourselves, yes, but every hour spent defending ourselves is an hour less of billable time that we have to make ends meet. And I can tell you this, as a small business law business, it's not easy to make money like folks don't think. It's an expensive business to be in the first place. But what we have to appreciate is, whilst our feet are being held to the fire very vigorously, the anti-money laundering regulations have empowered Silpa and its imaginary friend Cara in a way not unlike the Gestapo in the 1930s. They can come kick your door in and take your stuff. And if you read the anti-money laundering regulations, the majority of which we think, or let's just say not the majority, but a vast number of provisions are actually ultra vires that proceeds the crime law, the principal legislation itself. We're going to test that in court. But on the face of those regulations, it's a very harsh, very vigorous form of regulation that we're subjected to. But the other thing is, Sandra, it's not just us in the legal profession. It's just about every business that can fall under the umbrella of what is widely defined as doing relevant financial business in this country. Folks, I have clients who are outside the legal industry who are complaining on a daily basis bitterly about the fact that they have to do all of this. I have clients who are complaining every time I ask them for an electricity bill to prove that they're actually a physical person. All of that we have to endure. Makes business much more tricky, much more expensive, much more time consuming for us. But what about the folks overseas? Are those lawyers going to, is some form of CARA going to kick their door into? Are we actually going to be able to do that? How? That hasn't been thought through. Or maybe it has. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe it is presumed that we are so stupid that we don't think about those things. So I would invite every Caymanian business owner who has had to endure all of the stringent measures imposed on their businesses for the last couple of years to keep up with anti-money laundering, because as the Attorney General himself said, we're suffering from, what do you call it, revision fatigue, because they keep revising the anti-money laundering regulations, and they get more and more creative, because we know, we give the CFATF today, this is what they want. Tomorrow, it's an ever-moving goalpost. We all know that. It's been that way for a long time. But what we're going to see is real challenges for Caymanian businesses, both inside and outside the industry, enhanced costs for doing business in Cayman. And meanwhile, the law firms, the most lucrative businesses in Cayman, get to put half their labor force beyond the seas, and beyond the reach of this jurisdiction overseas. And I guarantee you that they will not be subject to any meaningful type of regulation, because I cannot see how that could even be feasible. So how does the CFATF feel about that? I wonder if anybody sat down with them and said, look, we've had these lawyers operating illegally overseas all these years, and we're not going to license them, and we're going to put them over there, and we have a piece of legislation here that says we're going to regulate them. You think the CFATF is that dumb that they're not going to say, hang on, how are you actually going to pull that off? It'll occur to them at some point, and guess what? We'll be looking at the gray list or blacklist again. Right?
Let's read a few comments. Marshall says, to me, it doesn't matter how long some of these politicians were lawyers. It's a Caymanian issue here, and they should all support and try to protect Caymanian lawyers. So good point. Someone also sent a WhatsApp message saying that some of the current legislators, such as Alva Saku, is actually completing law school, and so they wonder what his prospects will be of even obtaining articles, which we know for a lot of Caymanians tends to be a real challenge. So Masu, good morning to you. Your comments are noted. Jonathan says this premier is a real sellout and a present danger to us Caymanians 2020. Wake up, people. Marshall says one would think that Alden McLaughlin, a Caymanian and the premier and former lawyer, would be the first to look out for Caymanian lawyers in his own country. I guess he'd rather collect the lawyers' work permit fees instead of assisting the Caymanian lawyers. He needs to go. Vote him out next year. Neelis says, Marshall, let me just see, strengthening the Caymanian lawyers, he strengthens all Caymanians. If they control the lawyers, they control all. Remember, I need lawyers to fight government incompetence, hence. Okay, so point taken, Neelis, which is basically saying maybe he doesn't want to support the legal fraternity, the Caymanians in particular, because he's had a number of legal challenges that took really competent lawyers to fight the government, whether it was the port. There's other HR matters that have come by way of the courts that the government is being sued about. So that's an interesting perspective. Now, I think we need to remind people, Sammy, of the history of this legislation, because this legislation in different forms, and call what did Shakespeare say about a rose by any other name is still a rose? I don't know if that was Shakespeare, but somebody said that. So what is in a name? And this legislation has actually undergone this time around a significant name change. And that, when I heard that it was the same legislation just repackaged with a new fancy name, I thought, well, what would be the purpose of doing that unless you're trying to fool somebody? I mean, I don't know who he's trying to fool, but let's talk a little bit about the legislation and how it has developed into where it's at now, because it's been shot down before. So in the last go round, it was shot down. Like you said, it's still the same government. They might call themselves a unity government, but this is still a PPM-led government. And at the end of the day, they're bringing it back now, repackaged. Why do they think that people are not paying attention and it's going to not cause the same uproar that it did last time?
Well, I think they assume that by rebranding it and pulling out some of the more obvious provisions and throwing bones at us, like increasing the post-qualification experience to 5 years rather than 3 years, although Austin Harris told me the other day that government is flabbergasted because now that they've done that, people are complaining that's going to make it unfair for Caymanians to compete. And my response to him was, look, in the grand scheme of things, those I call them red herrings, right? Those are red herrings, and they are peanuts compared to the much larger issue of making these businesses, hold these businesses properly accountable. First of all, I haven't even touched on that yet. Making sure that they have a sufficient nexus and the oath of allegiance to this country by making them become Caymanian over time. And I'm not apologizing for that. I'm not nationalistic. There's many Caymanians in those law firms, partners now, who we have given status to. I'm not jealous of them like the premier would suggest. I wish them well. I have lots of other friends. Some are even clients. That's the strangest thing. And I don't hold any personal grudge against any of them, but I understand that, business will look after its own business. These businesses will look after their own business. They will look after profit. They're duty bound to do that. It is government that must hold them accountable. It is government that must resist their pressure, right, to make things more profitable for them. Government needs to do that balancing act, and I cannot understand how it can do that unless it has done some sort of economic impact assessment. And if it's done it, it should publish it. Hopefully, if they've done it, which I seriously doubt. It didn't cost us a couple of $1 million, and it ends up being privileged too, right? Because it's worth the investment to ascertain. I just gave you the number or round numbers of what we're foregoing in terms of work permit fees. A socioeconomic impact or economic impact assessment on this structure, this bill, would have been, and all that it brings with it, would have been very prudent, would have, in fact, have been the responsible thing to do, because we are going down a road that no one else has gone before. We are literally resigning this country to become the guinea pig for businesses that are going to reap even more massive profits off the benefits of operating in this jurisdiction, although that half of them might not even be here. Right? It's a wonderful concept. I mean, I give them praise for being very creative. And I want to know what it was they said to the government to convince them to do this, despite all that has happened in the past. Because you're right, Sandra, this has a long history. I didn't want to get into that because it would take forever going through that. But you are right. This is a relabeled version, a somewhat redacted version, changed up some language. They've dropped the whole concept of a recognized firm, for example. So all law firms can have overseas practitioners. Before, what the big firms in Georgetown wanted was, I call them the cartel, the group of firms that sort of control and handle the government. They were saying that we wanted exclusive domain over overseas practice because we're the pioneers of it, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's good for business, gay man, and everybody. I even heard Alva saying that the other night, which shocked me, that this is good for Cayman, and as if someone had produced some independent study to show that, right? I mean, that's human nature. You say things you need to say to get things done, right? And when you're motivated by profit rather than altruism, you're going to say everything you can say to gain that profit,
right?
And this is disturbing to hear members of parliament who should know better parroting the words of people who have a vested interest. Makes you really wonder. what kind of influence, how far this special interest group has, the reach that it has within Parliament, and how it achieves that. All right, and I say that because things such as, it should be a foregone conclusion that government would advocate strenuously for Caymanian ownership and control of these businesses, just like exists on all other industries. And the other thing that blew me away was, we now have, we created the operational license. I accept that initially as a revenue earning thing, because the law firms were growing so fast and there were so many lawyers and people were complaining about it. So someone back in the day, I think it was Truman's government, decided we're going to tax them by way of a operator's license fee. And it was done in, it's bracketed. So if you're a certain number of lawyers, you pay X. If you're not, if you're above that, you pay Y, so on. We've basically just cut and paste that into this legislation. And all you need to do as a law firm to get a license is pay a fee and sign a compliance certificate. I heard Kenneth going on about this, saying that it was a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Yeah, it's a wonderful concept indeed, because it's the easiest certificate in the world to sign, because it says, I certify the law, the law firm certify that we've complied with the law. And you do that and you pay a fee and you get your operator's license just for asking for it. Because all you have to do to comply with the law is pay a fee. It's an easy thing to certify, isn't it?
Right.
So some of the things we added, right, were basic stuff, and you're going to hear much fuss over the coming days, probably even today, about how draconian or invasive or totalitarian these things are. So I want to read some of them for you. This is on the operator's license provisions. We're asking for the basic stuff. And I can tell you, Sandra, that what the opposition has put forth as amendments is the bare minimum of what is required. We want things like, we want to know who the beneficial owners are.
Right.
That's pretty basic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age, where everybody has to show beneficial ownership.
Exactly.
We want to know, because we need to determine at the end of the day whether that law firm is a fit and proper entity to be in this country.
Right.
It may have partners or silent partners who are gun runners or terrorists or God only knows what. Isn't it obvious that you need to do that exercise? So one of the things we added was, we want them to certify, along with this, that they paid the fee, that we want details of the persons having beneficial ownership and control of the law firm, details of any arrangement which the law firm may have with any overseas person or entities that may affect the ownership or control of the law firm, details of any matters which may affect the determination by the authority of the law firm's fitness and propriety for the purpose of issuance of operational license. That's pretty wide, but should be obvious. Like, has this law firm or one of its affiliates been convicted of a anti-terrorist breach of sanctions or something of that nature overseas? Then you have the authority here has to be up. Do we want the embarrassment and the potential serious economic fallout from licensing such an entity? I mean, why in God's name would we not want that? It's just insanity to insist on anything less. And then things like the name of each of the article clerks and law students in the employ of the law firm. That's one that we all heard many times is badly needed. Yep. The name and we've added and nationality of each of the attorneys at law, so that we can get an idea of what the spread is.
Sure.
And then we want an actual true certificate, and this is what the opposition has put forward. A law firm shall certify to the authority that it has not in the preceding year committed any breach of this law or any other laws relating to the law firm's business, which would include laws in other jurisdictions. You see anything wrong with that, Sandra? Does that sound outrageous?
Nope. I mean, that sounds very run-of-the-mill to me, and something you'd want to have in place to protect the jurisdiction. I saw one of the comments that I think it might have been Marshall made about, the protection of Caymanian lawyers, and you yourself, Sammy, talked about this. It's not even a glass ceiling in these law firms, because you can't even see beyond it. It is a brick ceiling. because you see nothing, you don't get equity partnership. And, you know, at the end of the day, the opportunities are there for you to a certain extent if you are willing to play by their rules and play their game, which means you come into their organization, you don't get too involved in the local community, you support the one or two organizations that they say, yes, are good to support, and you pretty much just keep your head down and keep your mouth shut. You're not, the second they see you being, you know, an advocate for change in your community, then you become a liability to them. And I could go through a long list of attorneys that I'm aware of, whether it's a Theresa Lewis, a Oliver Watler, you know, some of them have broker deals, so I probably shouldn't really name them because, you know, they sold their souls in the end, kind of thing. But you know, you definitely
put in a position, Sandra, where I have to correct it. And I know some of them, and I've seen some of the deals, and I've spoken to them in private. Yeah. Some of them had no choice. They were literally between the, you know, the devil and the deep blue sea. They had to choose, and they chose the one thing that they could do to survive.
Yeah. And I totally, you know, I totally get that. You know, the irony of it, Sammy, is, you'll know I have a law degree. I'm not a lawyer. I've been unsuccessful in getting articles in this country. And I remember when I was leaving Maples and Calder, I actually had a conversation with Theresa, and Theresa may or may not remember this, but she said to me, I was standing up there with my girlfriend, Mary, and Theresa said, "Why are you leaving? Why are you resigning?" And I said to her, I kind of felt like, you know, I was going through a time of personal reflection and change. My father had just passed away, and I was like, is this really what I want to do with my life? Do I want to be stuck here working 18 hours a day? You know, earning the almighty dollar for these people and not being able to affect any real change in my community. And so I thought, you know, I wanted to take a step back from the situation, and resigning was really the only way to do that. Because once you're on a path, okay, the law firm has sponsored you through law school, there's an expectation for you to do articles immediately and, you know, just continue going. She said to me, you know, Sandy, we have, meaning people like Oliver, yourself, and others before me, had really tried to pave the way for someone like me to be able to come into a situation like Maples and be able to get a job and have opportunities that just didn't exist before. And she said to me, you know, there was a time when they would call her nigger and all sorts of stuff, and she just had to suck it up. And I was like, Theresa, first of all, as someone who grew up in the States, I just come from a different cloth. I'm 100% Caymanian, but I have had that experience where there's certain things that just do not fly with me, you know? And I said to her, I said, that's shocking, but not really in a Maples and Calder. But, you know, I said to her, I said, you know what, how I see it is before I have to stay. So in other words, before I have kids, private school fees, the house that the mortgage has to get paid and all these other things, before I get to that point where I have no choice but to stay in that environment, because financially, you know, you've got to pay your bills. Right now I have nothing. So I feel like, you know, I had my apartment, whatever, but I felt like I could walk away and I would be okay. Like I wasn't tied to them yet in terms of trying to maintain my lifestyle or whatever. So it was a lot easier for me to do it at that particular point. And I must say, reflecting back on it, the only thing that I wish I had done was gotten to the point where I had done my articles and got called to the bar and then left because that environment just wasn't going to be one that was conducive to me. But let's be clear. Someone was mentioning earlier, oh, you know, the premier should be all about supporting Caymanians, supporting Caymanian lawyers, whatever. This premier has also said on another occasion that as Caymanians, we should be happy with foreign investors coming into our country, setting up companies and getting all sorts of concessions from his government or any other government because they create jobs at the lowest levels. What he said was they're going to create receptionist jobs and secretarial jobs for us. So that speaks to how this premier views Caymanians. We're not management material, folks. We're not partner material in these law firms. You know, we're not running a Maples and Calder. We don't have equity partnership. We have to buy in to their paid partnership plan and pay to have the privilege of being a partner. So that alone, I think, should make it very, very clear the nature of the beast that we're dealing with when it comes to someone like Alden McLaughlin. Now, Linda is here, and Linda says, why is government hurting the reputation of Cayman across broad sectors? Construction industry is rogue with poor quality rush construction. Health hotels are being constructed downwind from the dump and violate crimes not being condemned by elected officials, destroying the famous reefs and 7 Mile Beach. CEC, very rogue and unregulated, abhorrent speech in the LA, broadcasted on YouTube that everyone around the world can see and hear from whatever industry. And folks, obviously Sammy is here to talk about the legal services bill. He's not a politician. He probably, I don't even know if he enjoys the topic of politics, but this is why I keep saying to everyone who is paying attention, it is important that we have a fix on how government decisions, government policy, government legislation impacts all of our lives. I mean, we hear shenanigans in the legal profession. How is it possible that the government could be allowing not only just non-Caymanians, but people who have not practiced Cayman Islands law, even in this jurisdiction, to sit abroad somewhere in a little cubbyhole and say that they're Cayman Islands law expert when there are Caymanians in this jurisdiction who can't get articles, who can't get jobs in these law firms, who can't get equity partnership, and so much more. It's just unconscionable that they would even think that that is an equitable thing to do, right? There's a minimal fee structure in place that, okay, if they breach the current situation, which means you're not really supposed to be practicing Cayman Islands law outside the jurisdiction, oh, you pay a couple $100 fine for these lawyers who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars individually, and as law firm, millions of dollars. And what I want to say is that is just, again, absolutely ridiculous. It has never been enforced to the best of my knowledge. No one has ever been charged or made to pay that $200 fine. And it just speaks to why we need to be making better decisions when it comes to the people that we elect to public office. So we have some people who are very well educated, the Alden McLaughlins of the LA, for example, and you think that they would know better. For whatever reason, they're not doing better. That's a problem. And then we have other people who are not necessarily well educated in the tenets of the law and what the implications are of some of this legislation, and they just go along to get along. So if Alden says this is what's good for the people, what's good for the country, they, oh, tick, you've got my vote as an MP. And, you know, ultimately it's hurting us as people in this country. That's the bottom line. So May the 26th is right around the corner, and I think we all need to wake up. So Neela says, only in the Cayman Islands you have lawyers who are clueless about our laws, and yet they're practicing here on island. Well, imagine being clueless about our laws and practicing overseas and still making money. I mean, yeah. Odette, good morning.
They've been doing it for well over a decade. I think it was 2007 that, and this comes from a speech I think that Mr. Ian Paget Brown QC did in the Grand Court in 2012, I think it was, which blew everyone away because he dared to say that which needed to be said, and he said it very elegantly. And I was there. That was one of the few days in my career where I was proud to be a Caymanian lawyer. Because I consider Ian Caymanian, even though he doesn't live here all the time. He has a business here. He's been here, I believe, before I was born, practicing as an attorney. He was one of the founders of the Caymanian Bar Association, and he believes in Cayman and in its future. And one of the things that gentleman did was after the debacle that ensued in 2017, when the then premier, now premier, had to pull the bill. Mr. Paget Brown took money out of his own pocket, drafted a piece of legislation based on the original draft bill that Wayne Panton's bill had been based on, which was a bill drafted by a gentleman named Clive Burrowman, a UK legislative draftsman, a competent gentleman. He was here in the late 90s, I think, as a legislative draftsperson for Cayman. He took that bill, took out the controversial parts, and put into it all of the agreed positions. And this is something that folks need to understand. They need to pay attention to what Leader of the Opposition, Ard McLean, said the other day. He listed the agreed positions. That is to say, the fundamental provisions that were agreed between the then opposition, which included the sitting speaker, and some of the government backbench, including Captain Newton. They went and negotiated with the government late into the night, and they came back with a number. There was about 8 major, and I have a list somewhere. Sandra, I was glad to send it, publish it, and we're going to publish it on ALPA's website, by the way, which we just set up. And one of the top thing on the list that they agreed was 60-40 Caymanian ownership and control of law firms. They literally had conceded that point. And for some reason, Mr. Panton resisted that. And then the following morning, while Mr. Panton was on the radio advocating for the bill, the Premier pulled it, which was the strangest thing that I ever seen. And yet they come back with this again, with the same thing where you only have to have one Caymanian. Now, I gather there are amendments that the Premier coming with. He is alluded to those. We haven't seen them yet. I gather the opposition hasn't seen them. At least the last time I spoke again about it, opposition side, they hadn't seen them. And I hope that good sense and a sense, including a sense of duty and responsibility, constitutional responsibility prevails, and that they come to their senses and accept those very minimalistic. Because the truth is, those things that have been proposed by the opposition, which I have seen, are based on what ALPA has put forth as fundamental provisions. But guess where ALPA got those from? Those are the things which we were advocating, those of us who have been supporting the Caymanianization of the law firms and licensure of overseas practice, proper regulation of overseas practice for years, decades now, some of us. Those same agreed positions that I just spoke to, those are the things that ALPA used to inform its fundamental provisions, which it sent to government. In fact, it sent to all of Parliament, the current sitting Parliament. And we said there were things like whistleblower protection in there. None of these things are in this bill. None of these things are in the amendments the opposition has proposed. And I say that to make the point that when Leader of Opposition Ard McLean says that they've taken a minimalistic approach, that's what I heard him say. That's absolutely right. What is being proposed, quite frankly, is the bare minimum. The bare minimum that government should pass to be able to look people in the face, the people that elected them in the face, and say, I have discharged my constitutional duty to you.
Right.
And you know, I don't even want to get into all of the abuses that we've heard about in the law firms. They say that that's over now. I even heard, based on what I heard, the deputy leader of opposition say that it sounds like they've had a come to Jesus moment on that for a while. I don't know. I hope that is true. I hope. But you know what? I don't trust. I'm not a trusting person. So let's make sure that this authority, that's the other thing that's being proposed, an independent authority has all of the teeth and tools in its statutory toolbox to make sure, just like with any other industry, that it can actually properly regulate the legal industry. Otherwise, I mean, a toothless tag is a useless animal. Right? Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate because, like I said, I've been on the inside and I have seen instances of whether it was like the IT manager of the firm, you know, he couldn't fix jack shit, to be honest, had to call the Caymanian in the middle of the night when the whole system was down to get it fixed. But yet he's the one with the 100,000 plus salary per annum and the big job title. And, you know, I've seen them do things at work permits where they change a person's position. They have them doing all sorts of things and they don't amend the work permit with immigration. They don't change it with immigration. But when it comes to immigration's attention, when the people do their job and bring it to immigration's attention, nothing comes of it. It's a little fine, which they can well afford to pay. And it's business as usual. And they just keep moving and move on. So Atlas says, vote for me. I'll make Cayman great again. Atlas, I don't know if that's a moniker that we want to have here in the Cayman Islands, but Neela says, so the law firms on Island are not 60% Caymanian and 40% non-Caymanian owned like the other businesses here on Island. No,
they never have been. Never have been.
They never have been. They haven't had to play to those rules at all.
But the majority of them now, Sandra, have the ability to do that because we've awarded status to
Right.
partners.
Exactly. So the partners, the foreign partners have been here long enough to acquire status. So now they could technically say, yes, we are Caymanian. But is there any reason why law firms were not, why they didn't have to adhere to the same 60-40 rule, generally speaking?
But yes, because the trade and business license law has had from its inception a provision that says this law shall not apply to any other trade or business that is not is licensed under any other law without reference to this law.
Right. So basically, they've always been
under the legal practitioners law. But here's the thing, Sandra.
Yeah.
We have never had licensure of law firms. So arguably, the lawyers who are licensed are always and the lawyers would come together and form traditional partnerships.
Partnership, right.
But it was at least at one point arguable that a partnership as a going concern, as a business, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the three types of structures prescribed by this law. You have sole practitioner, partnership, and corporate entity. It is arguable that those entities as a going concern were actually subject to the trade and business license law. We chose not to pursue that. And I say that because, and this is important to get, the law firm itself as a going concern is a different animal altogether, legally and physically, from the people who comprise it, lawyers who are in it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability, the reason you saw, Sandra, all of the abuses that you witnessed, right? And that you know about and I know about, I've been told about, is that at no point in time was a law firm ever held accountable as a going concern. No law firm was ever called in, right? The only threat that was used against them for leverage that I know about was withholding work permits. And at one point in time, once upon a time, when we had a Cayman protection law that protected Cayman interests, until we got embarrassed about that and we became all PC and said, oh, it needs to be an immigration law. Once upon a time, that board could do that, right? And I'm not saying that would be the right thing to do now. But if we do not have adequate legislative provisions to make sure that law firms behave themselves, that they at least perform to basic minimum standards of decency, right? And that they don't expose this country to risk and embarrassment. If we can't hold the firms accountable and their partners and shareholders accountable and their managers accountable, we have a problem, right? We are going to perpetuate that problem. No matter how many times they say hand and heart, they're going to behave themselves and they've come to Jesus. You know that's not going to happen. And because those firms, they change, right? I remember when Murat, I said this on the radio there, when Murat came here, they had two Caymanian partners, Patrick Smith and Owen Jones. I set up the firm for them along with Mr. Raymond Alberto. Look what they have become. They're a massive firm now, and they're not all Caymanian. I haven't looked at the structure. Maybe they could comply. But if they can't, what we're proposing is you give them a 5-year period or whatever Parliament determines is the right period. And I would suggest respectfully that is computed based on some sort of rational process. You give them a period that they can reach compliance in. So they have to basically hire Caymanians or their partners become Caymanians through the status grant process or whatever. And then you have an opportunity, right? But to say that this is too much to ask, really? Are we that embarrassed about protecting local interests?
Well, Neela seems shocked to understand that this is not the position. I think one of the things, Sammy, that always amazes me is how little the general public appear to be informed about what is happening in all facets of Cayman life. People simply don't know. And to me, keeping people ignorant, and sometimes we are willfully ignorant as a people, is how you're able to get away with so many things. And I think the government loves when the people are not informed or ill-informed or whatever the situation is, because they are able to run amok.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to say earlier, and I forgot, Sandra, so I'll say it again, I think I mentioned briefly earlier, and this is important to note, because I'm sure that you know, and you have friends who have aunts or sisters or brothers or mothers that work in law firms as support staff. If we're placing half the lawyers overseas, that's what this initiative achieves.
Right.
For the first time, we're licensing that happens. What we are foregoing a massive opportunity, or a great opportunity to have to employ a massive amount of Caymanians going forward in the law firms as support staff, not just lawyers. Right? For every lawyer, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 support staff in these firms.
Right.
Those jobs are gone too.
Yep. Yep.
Right. And you're saying to me that you're okay with it. You have 1 lawyer and 2 support staff in an overseas office, and they don't need to go through the work permit process. And those firms are operating using all of the benefits of the Cayman jurisdiction. This is what people need to understand. We don't have tangible assets. We have one great intangible asset, which is our legislative framework that creates us as a tax-free, in terms of direct taxation-free jurisdiction. And those firms come here, and their clients come here to operate within that jurisdiction. And they are saying, this is what they advocated for many years. Oh, we need folks on the ground and abroad so that they can get the business and bring it back to Cayman. Well, if they're planning to bring the business back to Cayman, why do they need to half the labor force over there?
Right.
And if you're going to allow that, right? I'm going through this exercise so you understand how generous, right, the compromise is on this bill from our side, right? When I say our side, I mean ALPA's side and the opposition side, because ALPA has met and decided they're willing to accept what the opposition is proposing based on representations we made. If we are not able to get those basic minimum things put in this legislation, Sandra, we are literally depriving Cayman of the opportunity to derive any real benefit from that industry, from the firms. And as I said the other day, elsewhere, this is going to be the precedent. You have many other businesses in the financial services industry, because it should not be presumed, by the way, as it was presumed by one member of the parliament the other night, that the financial services industry and the law firms are one and the same. And so you use the revenue generated by the financial services industry to say it produces more than 1/3. Yeah, the financial services industry does that, but the financial services industry is much more massive than just the law firms, the ones that are benefiting from this. But the law firms certainly make a lot of money, and they are going to be allowed to cut their costs by depriving Caymanians of an opportunity to work for those firms. And when they do that, you're going to have other folks in other industries saying, hey, if they can do it, why can't we? Which is a reasonable, rational position to take. So do we really want to go down that road? I don't know. I just can't come to terms with this no matter what. I don't know what's motivating the government. I am hoping, like I said earlier, that good sense prevails, and that they do the right and decent thing, right? The responsible thing, and they discharge their constitutional duty to those people that elect them. Because by analogy, just to demonstrate how this works as a country, if this were a company, right, all the residents of Cayman would be the ordinary shareholders, so to speak. They contribute, they pay taxes, consumption-based taxation every time they go to the grocery store. So they're contributing, so they have a stake in it too. But you have that group of preferential shareholders who are the voters, and they nominate the board of directors being analogous with the parliament. And in as much as a board of directors owes a fiduciary duty to not just the people who appoint them, but everyone else in the country, in the company, every other shareholder. And if they are not performing their duty, they get fired. Right. And if they breach certain fiduciary duties, they get prosecuted. Right? And how can we not see what's wrong here when we look at it through that scope? It's pretty basic. What these folks need to be reminded of more often is that they work for us. There's no other way around. It's this idea that the premier seems to have, that what I say goes, and he uses that against his own people. He goes to meetings and says, "Don't worry about my people. They gotta do what I tell them to do."
Yep.
And if those poor souls, if they have to suffer that kind of tyranny, I feel bad for them. Some of them I know are decent people. I hope to God that they actually come to grips with their conscience and vote the right way on this. Some of them have supported us quietly and not so quietly in the past. I hope, like Mr. Harris, I said to him to his face the other day when he came here to meet with me, with one of his constituents.
Mm-hmm.
I quizzed him at the end. I said, "Haven't heard now what is being proposed.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that any of this is irrational? No. Is it unreasonable? No. Is it harmful to Cayman? No. That's what we're proposing." So, well, why is it then that it's not agreed to? So I'm hoping, that despite the personalities involved and all the egos and the political posturing and what have you, and despite the fact that some folks don't seem to get it, being frank and honest about it, some of the based on some of the speeches I've seen so far, it clearly has gone over their head, or they've been hoodwinked into believing that this is the right thing, or as my friend Johan Moxon likes to say, they've been drinking the Kool-Aid. I hope that despite all of that, that we get some sensible legislation out of this thing, because this may very well be determinative of the outcome of the next election, just like the last one was. The last bill caused serious, irreparable political damage to that party. And if it hadn't been for the premier going forum shopping for the right electorate to vote in, he might not have won his seat back either.
Right.
We all know that.
Well, listen, folks, I think that, everyone knows that we are in an election year. We're months away from a general election, with it coming up in May. I encourage people to educate themselves and to try to make better decisions about who really has the interests of the Caymanian people at heart. And speaking about the fact that they work for us, we always had to remember that, right? We are the shareholders in this country, and they are supposed to be working for us. I want to remind you of the Premier's contact details. Guess what, folks? It is what it is. That's his information. There's his phone number. There's his email address. Message him, WhatsApp him, whatever. He tends to ignore WhatsApp messages by and large, but he will still see your incoming messages that you are not supportive of, once again, what his government is trying to do in relation to the legal fraternity. And as Sammy rightfully pointed out, it's not just impacting lawyers, it's going to impact all support staff, from the very secretary to messengers to, listen, with technology the way that it is, and especially during COVID, with everyone really waking up and realizing that they don't have to physically sit in an office to get work done. They could be anywhere in the world. Before you know it, tutus, they're going to be outsourcing the receptionist job to a call center in India or wherever, or in the UK, or whatever their preference is. And clients will have no clue that they're not calling the Cayman Islands. It's just a matter of programming it in the switchboard. And all of a sudden you've got people answering a phone call in a shoebox in London. Folks, wake up. As Johan Moxham also says, stay woke, folks. But for you to stay woke, you have to be awake in the first place. And I know a lot of you have not had an awakening yet, and we need to have an awakening. These guys care about their political purse. They care about staying in office. And if you start to say to them, we're going to be voting your asses out come May the 26th, just like we did last time, we removed a bunch, but we didn't remove enough. So they were still able to form this unity government. We've got to really stay on top of it. Also, I want to remind you guys that there is a protest this afternoon from 1 to 3 o'clock. Speaking of MPs, on the step of the Legislative Assembly, this is going down. If you believe that enough is enough in terms of a demonstration against violence and lack of accountability for MPs, and this is a direct result of the fact that this government has remained silent. They've said nothing, they've done nothing, knowing that they have a woman beater, essentially, in their midst who has pled guilty to multiple counts of common assault against a bar manager, her place of work. And I really wish that this is, where I'm hoping one day our laws can progress. Court is open court. You guys can go at any time. But you know what? We need to start having it available on Zoom so that all of you can log in and see trials, see the evidence that's put forward. Because if each and every one of you saw the video footage of this woman being assaulted, particularly in the kitchen scene, you would be showing up in droves at this protest, and you'd be demanding that the premier and every single member of his government takes a firm stance against violence in our community, and especially gender-based and workplace-based violence and just hate speech and the whole 9 yards, because it was just that shocking. I mean, it's the equivalent of what I was saying earlier in the program, where I felt like you needed to see the video footage of what happened to my dear Coco. Maybe you need to see the video footage of how this woman was assaulted and how it took 5 people to pull Mr. Bush, this honorable Speaker of the House, off of this woman, and how she probably was honestly in fear of her life in that moment. You guys need to see it. I wish I had a copy of the video, because I would certainly put it in my road a long time ago. Anyway, Sammy, thank you so much for coming on the program. This is your first time. Now you've been christened. You're no longer a virgin to the program. So you have an open invitation. We know that a lot of things are happening in the community, I'm sure that you care about. Feel free to always reach out. We have to have discussions at different level. We have to educate people. I think today's show was definitely an eye-opener for a lot of folks. Linda says that Orange is the UNESCO campaign, Orange the World to End Violence Against Women. Linda, I'm glad you explained that, because this morning I was thinking, I definitely have an orange CMR shirt, which I can wear, but I didn't know why we were being called to wear orange. So I wish that had been explained a little bit better, but thank you for that. Now I get it. And I will definitely be wearing my orange, and come out and support, folks. Starts at 1 o'clock. It's a matter of showing the people. The government never appears to understand that we're serious about anything until we protest. And that's why I find it so ironic that the speaker during his first, during the inaugural ceremony on Friday of last week, he was saying that we're protesting too much. We're speaking out too much, that we think we're other jurisdictions in the world. Shocking, but there you have it. So let's show him that our voice should count for something. So again,
Sandra, before we go, I would like to say this, for whatever it's worth. I agree with the sentiments expressed. Mm-hmm. I agree that something needs to be done. And one of the things that worries me is, and I let the fall blame wherever it may. Mm-hmm. Blame fall wherever it may. The speaker's case doesn't seem to be finished as yet. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, right? Mm-hmm. Because we saw it's based on the reports I saw. Mm-hmm. The Crown is considering whether they can proceed to sentence, because the defense needs to decide whether they're going to accept the facts in total, so to speak, all of the facts, including the facts relating to the one charge that hasn't been pleaded to.
Right. Well, I was there, and I can tell you it was a little bit confusing initially, because Mr. Alberga was kind of speaking doublespeak out of both sides of his mouth. But in the end, he said, because he was like, what was the big deal? And the judge said, I understand the big deal, because they had a letter from, I think it was November the 26th, where basically they were saying, well, none of this happened. They were still trying to say that the initial assault, which wasn't caught on camera, or wasn't clearly caught on camera, I should say, they were not willing to have Mr. Bush cop to. And it is important that he cops to all of the facts as presented. And I think Mr. Patrick Moran, in fairness to him, did a really good job of explaining to the magistrate why that was important from the perspective of sentencing. And when he showed her the letter that Bush's attorneys had written recently, she got it, and she said, yeah, I need to understand very clearly, no doublespeak here. Are you saying if we proceed with this as a sentencing hearing, that you are accepting the Crown's position, the facts as laid out by the Crown? And in the end, although he kept saying, we're splitting hairs, it's the kind of thing in law that you're splitting hairs for a reason. So I think in the end, Mr. Alberga did accept that they would be accepting the facts as put forward, although he kept saying, he would say that, and then the next breath he would say, well, we can't admit to the first offense because it's not on camera. And
So
supposedly Mr. Bush doesn't remember it, but we also can't deny it. It was like, what the hell?
What is your view on when this matter will be disposed of finally? Because,
well, I mean, they've said that sentencing is supposed to be later this month. I hope that happens before Christmas. I think it's unrealistic at this stage for it to be drawn out closer to the election, which I think a lot of people assumed that was what was going to happen. So I'm hopeful December, like this month. I think we're obviously very busy.
Prosecutor, I can tell you, sufficient on to the day that the Crown accepts the plea as is, whether there's a dispute over the facts or not, right? Because what I read was that there was an indication from the Crown that unless Mr. Bush and his attorney accepted that they could read all of the facts relating to all of the
then they would go to trial.
Then they would go to trial. That means it's a pending matter. So
but no, that's not the conclusion. And I think what happened is that if you read it in the Compass, you didn't get the full story because Andrew actually left a little bit before the conclusion. I think he was kind of watching two separate cases at the same time because the manslaughter case, the Bananas manslaughter case had begun. So I think it was one of those cases where he kind of worded it a certain way, but no, in the end, they accepted that, yes, this is the facts. And so last week, Thursday, what we had was a proper sentencing hearing. And so a sentencing decision will be coming down at some point because Patrick Moran was saying, listen, if not, we're going to proceed with a trial, or at the very minimum, what's the type of hearing that it's called again?
Voir dire.
Let's repeat it one more time.
Voir dire. A voir dire.
No, it was
I wouldn't apply.
There's another term where you bring in some evidence, but it's not like a full trial. It escapes me right now, but essentially, he was willing to do that. He was willing to say, we can proceed with this being a sentencing hearing, but I'm still going to call witnesses if he's disputing anything. I will call the victim. I will call other people that were there. It's driving me crazy now.
All of that, Sandra, sounds like a lot of delay to me.
Yeah. So in the end,
justice delayed is justice denied, right? And the longer it takes, right? And bear in mind that there was once a no confidence motion brought that was shot down.
Right.
It was rejected by the acting speaker as on the basis that the matter was sub judice. Right. I remember Arden McLean bringing the no confidence motion, and so I say all of that to make the point that as long as the sentencing isn't concluded, then in as much as that might be an excuse or a reason or a basis for not bringing a no confidence motion, then the government can remain quiet and not do anything about it. But when the day comes that sentence is passed, you would expect, because we all know what happened in other jurisdictions, you would expect that the premier would move that himself. Of course, he may well be committing suicide politically in doing so, because that is the foundation upon which his makeshift government rests. And people need to pay attention to that. Not and for all the reasons you advance, but for the fact that there's some fancy footwork that has been going on with all these kinds of things in the past, and that needs to stop, and people need to be called out on it. And I see there's a lot of discontent about inaction now. And for that reason, the Crown Prosecutor's Office should make sure that matter is dispensed with as quickly as possible to avoid any further control. I think at
this stage it will happen in December. But listen, whether he pleads to 3 assault charges or 2 assault charges, the woman was still assault 3 times over 20 minutes, and no one has any doubts now about that. Contentions even, because again, there was this question of him trying to mitigate the sentencing hearing by claiming that she had attacked him. And, the magistrate was trying to make it very clear, are you going to be putting forward this position? And in the end, Ms. Dahlberger had to say no, although he still tried to do it when he replayed the video and said, oh, well, why is Mr. Bush's head bobbing in that way? And she's like, what do you mean? what are you saying I should be interpreting here? So lots of shenanigans were going on. It was very, very interesting to see. But thank you so much, Sammy, for coming on the program. Again, folks, we will be at the protest live, so make sure you tune in for that later on this afternoon. And have a safe weekend.
You too.
All right, my dear. Thanks again. Okay, good, folks. That's all she wrote. We'll be on later on, so make sure you keep track of your notifications are on for Facebook, and we'll see you guys around 1 o'clock for the protests.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Cold Hard Truth. Make sure to check Facebook for showtimes and more information and the latest news at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Subscribe to our IG and Facebook pages to get the latest happenings.